Many people have asked me the same question. Why do you use vscode for all your YouTube tutorials instead of just using Visual Studio? It's a fair question, and after answering it over and over again, today I want to present you the top 5 reasons why I prefer vscode for .NET development. Let's start. Let's start with the installation experience, because this is one of those things that everybody has to go through, and the experience itself is going to be very different between Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code. But before going there, let me actually establish kind of a baseline of what kind of machine we're going to be using for this installation. So let me just show you the specs of my box very quickly. Over here, here's my task manager. And what you're going to see is that I am using an Intel Core i7 CPU of the, I guess it's the 9th generation. And so, which is a very fast CPU, it works great for me. So that's going to be the CPU. In terms of memory, what I'm using here is 32 gigabytes of memory, which is plenty of memory, is more than what I usually need. And in terms of disk, I'm going to be choosing, here's my OS disk, and you can see what I'm using is a Samsung SSD 970 Evo Plus, 250 gigabytes. That's going to be my disk. So by all means, this is a very, very fast machine. It could be faster, but it's fairly fast. And so this is what we're going to be using for all the installations that you're going to be seeing. Right, so let me minimize this. And like I said, I have both installers here. We're going to get started with Visual Studio. So I'm going to click on the Visual Studio installer here, double click there. And I am presented with this screen, which is the installer for the installer. So you have to install the installer first. So I'm going to click on continue. And so it's going to just download a few bits. And so this is going to become the actual application that's going to be in charge of installing Visual Studio. So let's just give it a second. And here we are now in the installation experience for Visual Studio. Now, before we select anything on this screen, one thing that I should clarify is that all I want to get into my box is the tooling required to develop .NET and ASP.NET Core applications, and of course with C#, right? That's all that I need in my box. So this is not about either desktop development or Python development or game development or any other kind of development. This is just about getting tools for .NET, ASP.NET Core, and C#. Okay, and so one thing to notice here already before even selecting anything is how much space this is going to take. Because if you look at this corner down here, notice that even before installing anything, this is already going to take 1.13 gigabytes of my box. This is just a Visual Studio Core experience, and you're going to see that number changing as I select components over there. Now, the expectation in this screen is that you select what is going to be the workload that you want to install. And the workload is just the bundle of the different set of toolings that are going to be installed in your box for the type of application that you want to develop, right? So you can see that there's many types of applications that you're going to be able to develop with Visual Studio, and that's expected. But as a junior developer, it can be challenging to know, right, what exactly I'm supposed to install here, right? And even I get a little bit confused in terms of what to select here anytime I'm going to develop my applications. And you can see that there's even a prompt on the top here saying, hey, you need help choosing what to install, right? So we know that this is a bit confusing. So that's one of the things that I don't really like about this experience here, because I believe these things should be very straightforward for a .NET developer. I should not need to even choose here and get confused about what to install. Now, from experience, I do know that what I want here is the ASP.NET and web development workload here. So I'm going to actually select that one, okay? And notice that just by selecting that, my disk space has bumped from 1 gigabyte to about like a little bit more than 9 gigabytes, right? So that's already a bit shocking for me, how much space this is going to take. It's a lot of space. But the thing is that, and not just that, there's this installation, just by choosing that, this is going to involve a lot of components that I'm pretty sure I'm never going to be using, right? And things that actually don't make sense for me. For instance, if you see on the right side over here, notice this set of optional components that have been pre-selected for me as part of this installation. Now, the thing is that, I mean, I'm going to be doing .NET development, specifically one of the latest versions of .NET that has nothing to do with .NET Framework, right? So why would I want to install .NET Framework for a development tools? So I'm going to just unselect that. And again, also .NET Framework project and item templates, right? So that's not needed. I also don't need a cloud tools for web development. .NET profiling tools, Maybe. So let's keep that. Entity framework tools. I'm not going to be doing any sort of entity framework development in my case. So I don't need entity framework. Live share, sure, that could be useful. .NET debugging with WSL, not really. I'm not going to be debugging in WSL. IntelliCode, that could be also useful. So let's keep that. So yeah, space went down to 7.55 gigabytes. But still, if we now go into individual components, and I like to be very, very picky about this, because when you install one tool like this, you know that there are going to be a bunch of modifications to your box, right? A bunch of things getting installed, and that over time could result in different kinds of problems depending on what you install, right? So just install the minimum that you're actually going to need. And so in this individual components screen, notice that this is already prompting me to install both the .NET 6 runtime and the .NET 7 runtime, right? But in my case, I only want to do .NET 7 development. So why would I want .NET 6? So I'm going to remove .NET 6, but notice this. I actually can't remove .NET 6 because it is saying that it is required for the workload that I have selected, right? So, and that I don't really like. Like if I'm going to be doing .NET 7 development, why would I want to have also .NET 6 runtime installed here? So, so I'll click cancel because I do need the other tooling, right? So sure, let's keep going. So this is also prompting me to install .NET Framework 4.7.2 13 pack and .NET 4.8 SDK, .NET Framework 4.8. So I don't need .NET Framework. I'm going to be doing .NET 7 development. So let's just remove that. But hey, you cannot do that because this is required by a bunch of other components that have been pre-selected for me. So again, I am stuck with that. And so I cannot unselect this. Okay, so just keep going. So I do need the .NET SDK, so that's fine. Keep going, keep going. And this is one of the other things that really bothers me. Why do I have to install things for SQL Server if I may not even be using SQL Server? Let's say I'm going to be using Cosmos DB or MongoDB or something completely different, right? Why do I have to install anything for SQL Server? So I'm going to unselect CLR types for SQL Server, and guess what? I cannot unselect it, right? Connectivity polishing tools, I cannot unselect it. Container development tools, I cannot unselect it, right? IIS Express, I have not used IIS Express in years, right? This day for .NET development, what you would be using is a Kester development server, right? Why do I need to be installing IIS Express? But you have to install it, right? And any of these things. So this is one of those things that really, really bothers me. Like, why do I have to install so many components when the only thing that I want to do is start writing my ASP.NET Core applications, right? So yeah, so those are the things that really bother me about this installation experience, and I have not even started installing this thing. But so yeah, let's say that we're going to just go with this because we don't have any more options. And one thing that I'm also going to do is to open up a little timer here, right? Just to get a sense of how much time this is going to take in a machine like mine, right? And so let me go back here and I'm going to click on install. Okay, and so let's go ahead and start the timer. Okay, and let's see how much time this is actually going to take. All right, so installation just completed, and I'm going to click on pause here. And Visual Studio is actually opening in my other screen here. Let me show you. It's opening right there. And so, but yeah, I mean, notice this. It took 6 minutes, 35 seconds to install this entire version of Visual Studio in my box, right? And so, which you might consider it is a fast installation time, but consider how much space this took. And let's also compare, we're going to compare this with Visual Studio Code, right? And how much you can expect there. And you can see that, yeah, Visual Studio just open here. It is ready for us to start using it. But now let's compare this with Visual Studio Code. So let me just close this. And let me also close the Visual Studio installer over there. And let's open up the Visual Studio Code installation. So I'll double click on this and this opens up. I'm going to say I accept. Okay, I'll click on next. And let me actually minimize this for a moment. And this. And yeah, so location, that's fine. Yeah, I mean, that's fine. Do we want to register? Yes. Add to path? Yes. Click on next. And just like we did with Visual Studio, we're going to do our timer. But before doing that, I mean, notice that I don't have any more options, right? This is just Visual Studio Code and nothing else. And of course, one thing that Visual Studio is doing for us is installing all the .NET SDK and all this other tooling for .NET for us, which makes sense, and which is something that we'll also have to do ourselves as we go through this installation. So I'll go ahead and start my install. Before, let's just bring in this timer here. Let's go ahead and refresh this, and I'll say install, right? Start timer. Let's see how much time this actually takes. All right. So yeah, installation completed. And then if I just click finish here, I'll be taken into the Visual Studio Code initial screen over here, as you can see. There you go. So we have Visual Studio Code installed. It took no more than about 16 seconds to install. But of course, to be fair, we don't have any tooling at this point for actual .NET development, right? In this case, it's just Visual Studio Code. So to be on pair with the Visual Studio experience, we will also have to install the .NET SDK. So let's us actually bring in the .NET SDK screen. Over here, this is the download page for the .NET SDK, and I'm going to go ahead and download the .NET 7 SDK. So I'll click on this link here to download. So download starts. Let's just do that. That should take just a couple of seconds. Okay, I click on the installer. Here we are. Let's go ahead and install this. Okay, let's continue our timer here. Of course, timer keeps going, just to add to the additional installation time. Okay, and while this happens, let me just close the browser there. All right, so installation completed, and I'll just click on close. And as you can see, we have not even reached 1 minute of installation between Visual Studio Code and the .NET SDK. But of course, we may also want to have a little bit of more actual C# coding features in Visual Studio Code that are not fulfilled either by Visual Studio Code or even with the .NET SDK that we may still be missing, right? So what I'm going to do is just look for the extension, the one extension that you're always going to need for developing C# applications in Visual Studio Code. So I'm going to go into Visual Studio Code, into the extensions hub over here, and I'm going to be looking for the C# extension. Right, so this is the one extension provided by Microsoft that enables all sorts of productivity features for C# code development in your box. And yeah, I mean, before I install the extension, let me just go ahead and start again our timer here. So I'll start that. I'll click on install. Okay, so that's going to bring in that extension. Just give it a moment. Let's see the timer going on here. And yeah, it is complete. The extension has been installed, right? We can see that it shows as our one install extension. And at this point, I'm pretty much ready to start coding my .NET applications in Visual Studio Code. So in total, how much time did it take? A little bit more than a minute and 12 seconds, which is, I think is massive compared to the time that it took us to install Visual Studio. And also consider that in this experience here, we did not have to make so many selections, so many options to select components and stuff. All we did was install just the editor, .NET SDK, just one extension, and we're good to go, right? Plus, I can guarantee you that the space needed for this is really, really low as compared to the space that we needed to install Visual Studio. And if you're curious about the actual space needed for Visual Studio Code, let me show you this. Here's my C drive over here. And Visual Studio Code will be located in the local app data location here. If you go into programs, Visual Studio Code, this is the installation of Visual Studio Code right here. And if you just look at the space very quickly, let's do properties. And you can see right here how much space this is taking as compared to the many gigabytes that were asked to install Visual Studio, right? So it's a massive difference. And yeah, and I just complain because there's people that may not have that much space available, right? And so that can make a significant difference in the sense of can you use Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code, right? And like I said, you don't need that many components to develop .NET applications. You just need a good editor, the .NET SDK, maybe some extension, and that should be good for you to start developing your .NET applications. Let's now look at the update experience of both of these tools, because this is something that you will have to do every few weeks or sometimes more than once in a week. And it is good to be in the latest version of these tools because they will bring either bug fixes or security updates or even new features that are going to improve your overall developer experience, right? So you want to have the latest version always. And so, but it's good to see how much time it will take to perform these updates in both tools. So on the left side, I have Visual Studio. And on the right side, I have Visual Studio Code. And you can see that both of them are ready for an update. You can see the update indicator right here and over here also for Visual Studio Code. And before doing the update, let's just check very quickly what version we have of each of these tools. So if you go to Help, About Visual Studio, you're going to see that I am using version 17.4.0 of Visual Studio. And then if you go into, let's say, Visual Studio Code, Help, About, this is going to be version 1.73.1. All right. And so those versions are kind of close in the sense of when they released each of these tools, which is a few weeks ago, in my case, when I'm recording this. So they are kind of the same age, if so. And so let's start with Visual Studio and let's see what happens. So I'm going to go ahead and click over here. I'm going to click on View Details. Okay, and that's going to open up our Visual Studio installer, which is going to show us what version we're going to move into. As you can see, we are moving into version 17.4.3. All right, so I'm going to click on Update. And of course, this is going to prompt us to actually close Visual Studio so that the update can actually happen. And before doing that, let me actually just go ahead and minimize Visual Studio Code. And just for fun, let me open up a timer here so that we can get an idea of how much time this will actually take. Okay, so I'm going to say continue. I'll start my timer here. And let's see how much time this update is going to take. Now, just to be fair, I only installed the ASP.NET Core workload for Visual Studio so that they are kind of similar with Visual Studio Code in terms of what components are actually installed, right? So this should only be updating components for ASP.NET Core. All right, so stop. And the update has completed, as you can see. We are now in the latest version. And yeah, here you can see how much time it actually took, 3 minutes and 24 seconds to get Visual Studio updated to the latest version. Okay, and let me go ahead and actually close the installer now. Okay, and let me put Visual Studio back where it was. So yeah, so that's how much time you can expect Visual Studio to update in the case of just the ASP.NET Core workload, and of course in a machine like the one that I have right now. So now let's take a look at Visual Studio Code. So let me bring back Visual Studio Code over here, and let's go ahead and do a very similar exercise, right? So I'm going to go ahead and click in the notification over here. I'll click on restart to update, and before doing that, let me actually just grab my timer over here. I'm going to reset it. Okay, and now let's go ahead and do restart to update, and I'll start my timer now. And oh, stop. It is updated now. Yeah, that's how fast Visual Studio Code is. And well, the fact is that Visual Studio Code proactively actually downloaded the update for me in the background, right? So that was already there. So all it had to do is just restart, and that will start bringing in the brand new update. But that's kind of the experience that you can expect with Visual Studio Code, right? And that's one of the reasons, one of the other reasons that I really like Visual Studio Code, because it is really fast in terms of performing updates, right? Like I said, this is something that you have to do every few weeks or every few days sometimes. And I don't really like having to wait even those 3 or 4 minutes for the tool to get updated. And in fact, Visual Studio sometimes will actually require you to restart the entire machine, right, to acquire the update, depending on the components that you have installed in your box, right? In this case, it didn't require it. Sometimes it might need. Visual Studio Code is just incredibly fast, so you almost waste really no time to do an update. So really like Visual Studio Code because of this. The next area that I think we should cover between these two tools is the performance area, because the amount of resources that each of these tools are going to be using from your machine is going to be very different, and not everybody has the amount of resources that are required for at least one of these tools. So here on the left side, what I have is my terminal in my projects directory, where if I there, I have a bunch of Visual Studio solutions or code bases that I want to show you what happens as we start going into the code. On the right side, I'm showing you my task manager with my memory usage right now. And what we're going to do is actually, just so you can get an initial idea, this is how much memory I'm using right now before doing anything. And we're actually going to switch into the processes area here so that you can see how the different processes for Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code start spinning up over there. So I'm going to switch. First, let's go with a very small solution. This one here, to do API. And this is one that I found on GitHub. It shows many of the different projects that you can create with .NET and ASP.NET Core, and but it's still a small solution. So let me just open up the solution that we have here to do API SLN. So this is going to go ahead and open my Visual Studio. You can see it is opening, and it should load in a moment. Yeah, there it is. Let me put this on the left side. And notice that how Visual Studio starts opening up here and quickly starts climbing up in memory usage. Notice that these are ready beyond the 1 GB usage. So without doing much, just by opening this solution, which is very small, just 5 projects, we are already using more than 1 GB just for this one solution. Now let's compare that with Visual Studio Code. So let me go back to my terminal over here. And what I'm going to do is just type code dot, and this should open Visual Studio Code in that exact location. So it's right here. There you go. Now I'm going to close that. And Visual Studio Code shows up over here. And let's see how much memory we are using. So let me just close this and close that. And let me do this. Let's highlight memory usage right here. Not even 600 megabytes, which is about half of the memory that we are consuming from Visual Studio right now, right? So here's for comparison both of them. Now, it may not seem like a big difference, but things start compounding as you start working with more and more projects, because usually people will have not just one solution, but multiple solutions open for the different projects that they're working on, right? And so let's see what happens as we start opening more projects. So in this case, let me just go down into my projects directory once again, and I'm going to go into my eShop and containers project here, and I'll go into SRC. And I'm going to open up my solutions. This is a solution that has a bunch of other projects in here. So let's see, it's opening right now. Just give it a moment for it to load. Okay, so it just loaded. Okay, it's right there. And so let's see, this one actually has 29 projects. As you can see over here, it's 29 projects. And so it is loading also on the right side here. So notice that this one is climbing up beyond what was used for the first one, just a little bit more, but it just keeps climbing and climbing. Okay, so at this point we are getting close to, I guess, 3 GB of usage on my machine with those two Visual Studio solutions. VS Code right now is at 500 megabytes, but we're going to now, of course, open up the same thing in Visual Studio Code. Just go up one directory, and then let's open up that code base. In code, notice that code actually opens much faster, right? So it's in the order of a few seconds faster, of course. But yeah, it's right there. And notice that Visual Studio Code is not spinning up another instance of Visual Studio Code. We are still using, I'm going to close this. We're still using the exact same instance right here. So that's why you see that this one instance started climbing up in terms of memory, right? And now we're at 1 GB. 1.2 GB with Visual Studio Code, but it's nowhere near the sum of the two instances of Visual Studio that we have here, right? These two instances are still having much more consumption of memory in the machine. Well, Visual Studio Code just remains very, very steady, and it is actually works very well. It's very responsive, right? It's all good in Visual Studio Code. Now, let's look at a really big solution, right? So what happens when you have dozens and dozens or even hundreds of projects loaded in a Visual Studio solution, which is where things really get interesting. So let me go back into my terminal here, and I'm going to clean this, and let's go up, and let's go into my ASP.NET Core directory here. So this one here is the actual code base for ASP.NET Core. So let's see what happens when we try to open this solution. So I'll go ahead and open that. Okay, so it is coming here. Now notice that this one here is actually going to take a while to load because of the number of projects. So in Visual Studio, the experience of opening your solution would vary depending on the number of projects, right? So you cannot really do anything here until this whole loading of projects completes. And you can see that even it may get into this situation where Visual Studio is just not responsive at all until all these projects are loaded, right? So, but hopefully this should load in a moment. Should be done right now. Yep, right there. So let's put this on the left side. And then I think this instance here is going to be the very first one on the top here. And notice that this is going to start climbing up more and more as Visual Studio starts doing, starts doing things behind the scenes for all the language support and different productivity improvements in Visual Studio. But notice that this is already at, let's see, this is 3 GB right now. And it will keep climbing, right? Keep climbing. And in fact, let me show you my performance tab over here. Notice how memory keeps climbing. In this case, because of the usage of Visual Studio, right? And then, interestingly, CPU is also going crazy here. I mean, notice we're using 100 CPU here, but it's half of it is just on this Visual Studio instance. So what's going on there? We are not doing anything. We're just not doing anything at all, and yet the machine is very busy dealing with this Visual Studio solution, right? So at this point, if we start adding these 3 solutions, and let's actually, just for fun, let's open one more. And by the way, let's not forget Visual Studio Code. So let's open the same thing in Visual Studio Code, right? So let's go ahead and do just code dot, okay? And notice that we are right there. No time to waste here. So there's no need, even with all those 500 projects, we are already in the Visual Studio Code interface right here. And we are ready to start doing whatever we need to do with all of our code over here. So the experience of opening a brand new, of opening a code base in Visual Studio Code is really fast. It's really fast, right? So there's no waiting and no delaying, no weird frozen things. It's just fast. And notice also over here that our memory usage of Visual Studio Code is just about 1.5 gigabytes right there, right? While Visual Studio is already reaching more than 5 gigabytes just in that one solution, right? Which I get is a big solution. It's not everybody's going to have 500 projects, but I have had the chance to work in projects that have dozens and dozens of projects in a single solution, and it just becomes a problem as you start adding more and more and more. It is more and more time that you have to take anytime you have to open that solution. And so, yeah, just for fun, let's open up one more solution here. So let's see, we're going to go for our clean architecture solution that I have here. I'll open up that. Okay, so it's opening up. This one, it doesn't have really that many projects, so it should open fairly fast, hopefully. Yeah, so just waiting here. Yep, there it is. Here we have it on the left side. Okay, and it's coming up here on the right side, which array just climbing up is likely going to go across 1 gigabyte, because why not, right? Without us doing anything, we're going to do the same thing with code. Here's code, opening up, same solution. Right, same code base right there. Here's code climbing up a little bit more. We may get to 2 gigabytes, but it's not going to be anywhere close to the sum of all of the other Visual Studio solutions that you can see on the right side. And so this is interesting for me and very important because, like I said, not everybody has the amount of resources that in this case I have. So if I go down into performance, of course I have 32 gigabytes, right? But notice where we are right now as compared to where we were when we started this section of the video, right? And so if you're working with only, let's say 16 gigabytes, right, which will be common in a laptop, or even less than that, this is going to become a problem, right? You cannot really use Visual Studio or not use it that much because of the amount of resources it is consumed. While Visual Studio Code is just fine, right? It works just fine. And so now let me go quickly back into this Visual Studio. What I'm going to do now is just close all instances of Visual Studio to see how much memory we can reclaim just by closing these solutions. So I'm going to just go into my taskbar. I'm going to say just close all windows for Visual Studio. So that's going to close all Visual Studios. And then let's see what happens with our memory usage as Visual Studio goes away. So all of our Visual Studio solutions are now closed. And so notice how much we are saving here, right here by just closing those solutions, right? So it's a massive amount of memory being reclaimed by doing that. And now at the same time, let me now close all of my Visual Studio codes. Let's just close all of those, close, and let's see how much memory we're reclaiming by doing that. Let's give it a second, and there you go. So here we can see this is the amount of memory that we're reclaiming right there. Okay, not that much because we didn't use that much anyways, right? So keep this in mind as you choose between Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code. Depending on the amount of resources that you have available, it may be not really a good option to go with Visual Studio. Visual Studio Code works just fine, even in a more constrained environments, right? And even then, even if you have a good machine like one that I have, as you have more projects, it will take more and more time to be able to start actually coding. While Visual Studio Code is it just happens right away. The next area that I'd like to cover as part of this comparison is Visual Studio Solutions. And so as you may know, solutions are really just an artifact of Visual Studio that is being used for grouping a series of projects together in the IDE so that you can work on them, right? And they're actually required or the default way of working with projects in Visual Studio. Here what I have is one Visual Studio solution that I found on the web in GitHub. This is the eShop on Containers solution. And this is one that showcases a different set of microservices and how they can operate and work together in a kind of an end-to-end application that goes from the microservices to the front end, and even including things like API gateways and stuff, right? And so if we open this source directory, you're going to see the different folders for API gateways, a bunch of building blocks that are being used by the microservices, the actual microservices in this location here, a bunch of web apps, right, that are going to be interacting with those microservices, and then a folder here for tests. And then if we collapse these other ones, let me collapse this for a moment. If you go into services, you're going to see, like I said, these are different microservices, and each one has a different set of folders depending on the business of each of the microservices, right? Now let me focus here now in the ordering one, because the thing is, what happens usually is that as you start having more and more projects in your solutions, there may be the case that some people may not need to work on all of this code base all the time, right? So for instance, if I am the developer that's in charge of the ordering or the ordering microservice, there's no need for me to be loading all the projects for all the services and even API gateways and all the other stuff all the time, because that just consumes time, right? As we have seen, as you have more projects, Visual Studio is going to take more time to load, right? And so it's just more things to build and compile. And so I'd like to do something about that. But before that, let's just make sure that everything here is actually built in. So let me just go ahead and do build solution. All right, so let's make sure that everything is built in properly. And then what I'm going to do is, as people like to do, is just create another solution that only has, actually I'm not created, but I already have this solution ready, but I'm going to open this solution that only has a project required for the ordering microservice. So yeah, as you can see, everything is built in just fine. And so what I'm going to do is just close this. And here I am in the directory where I have that solution. I also have another solution that is called ordering service SLN. So I'm going to open that one. So ordering service SLN. And like I said, this solution is going to have only the projects required for the ordering microservice. So that allows me to have a much more simplified environment. I only have to build the things that I have to work on. So it loads faster, it builds faster, and I can browse the code faster, right? So as you can see, this has only the ordering microservice with the tests and these 5 projects in there. And also some building blocks that are required by the microservices, right? If I build this, let's make sure this is also built in fine. So I'll build solution. And then, yeah, so everything is built in properly, okay? And so as I am working in my ordering microservice, it turns to be that now I need to introduce a brand new feature, which is going to be, let's say, telemetry, right? And this is a kind of a fictional scenario, but I want to show you what happens here. And I need to introduce telemetry to this solution. What I'm going to do is just add a brand new class library that's going to have my telemetry, my emit metrics API, right? That my microservice is going to start using. So what I'm going to do is just right click in ordering here. I'm going to say add new project. And this is going to be a simple class library. So I'm going to select that on the left side, class library. And so let's pick the right location for this. It's going to be under services, ordering, select folder. And let's name this ordering.telemetry, right? So ordering.telemetry is going to be our telemetry thing. And then everything here is actually using .NET 6. So we're going to stick to .NET 6, make sure that things work properly. So I'll create that. So this is going to create that brand new project. You can see it right here. And first thing we're going to do is just rename this class 1 into something more meaningful, like metrics emitter. So that's going to be our class here. I'll say yes, so that we get that name over there. And then just before coding it, we're going to also fix the namespace, which is this namespace is not making sense. So let me just fix that by grabbing the namespace from ordering API. I'll go into controllers, orders controller. Let me just grab this namespace over here. Services. Okay, so that's that. There. So that should be the right namespace. Now, what is this class going to do? All it's going to do is just have one method that is going to be used to just emit a successful metric, right? Supposedly. So I'm going to add public static void emit success. All right. And so we're not going to actually implement this. We're just going to say emit success here. But what the point that I want to make is that now we're going to go into our orders controller. And then at this point, let me just minimize, well, collapse this a little bit and that. And here in orders control, what we want to do is down here in this ship order async method, just before returning, let's say over here, we want to be able to emit that telemetry, right? So what we're going to do is, of course, we need to have a reference between this ordering API and our brand new project. So I'm going to right click in order API. I'm going to say add project reference. I'm going to say ordering.telemetry. I'll hit OK. So that gives me access to the types defined over there. So now I'll be able to say, of course, well, before doing that, let me go back here and then let's make sure this is static. This is going to be a static class, a static method. So now I can say metrics emitter dot emit success, right? Okay, so now supposedly my API is able to emit a success just before returning anytime we successfully shipped an order, right? And so let's just make sure that this is still built in properly. I'll go ahead and say build. Okay, building API. Yep, it's building properly. No issues there. And the next thing that I'm going to do is just make sure that these changes are staged for commit later on. We're not going to commit this, but I just want to at least stage this, right? All my changes in there. And now what I'm going to do is just get out of this solution because this is my solution, right? I am the owner of the ordering microservice, so this works for me. But other team members are not going to be really interested in that solution at all, right? So now I'm back in my terminal here, and what I'm going to do is just to simulate what will happen for somebody that comes in for the first time and is going to open the main solution that we have here. So what I'm going to do is just do a git clean -xdf, just clean everything here that's temporal here, especially all of the bin obj directories, right? All of these things are temporarily generated by Visual Studio or by .NET as you build things. And so what I'm going to do is just go back to our original solution, the eShop container services and web apps SLN. So I'm going to go back here. Okay, so opens. And so, all right, here we are, Solution Explorer. Right, and so here we're back into our list of microservices. And so first thing we're going to try to do here is to make sure that we can build the solution, right? So I'm going to go ahead and say build solution. Okay, and so let's see what happens. Okay, and so this did not succeed, unfortunately. And let's see if we can get the build log over here. Yeah, so we have a bunch of projects that are failing. And we go to error list, maybe we can focus on the errors over there. Yep, and so in fact, it is complaining, right? Because it is saying unable to find project information for the project something ordering.telemetry, which happens to be the project that we just added, and we did add it to the solution, right? So, but if we go to services, ordering, over here, there is, as you can see, there is no telemetry project. It is not here. And why is that? Because we added that to the old solution. We didn't add it to the main solution, right? And so what we did by doing this is we just broke the ability of everybody else in the team to be able to build the complete solution here, because we added a project only to the solution that we are working on, right? And this is not just a problem for the other developers. This is also a problem if you have a CI and CD system in place. You are ready, and that's if that system depends on the solution, is also going to result in a broken build because that solution is not built anymore. And so I have seen this happening many times in my years working with Visual Studio. And of course, what you want to do here is just go ahead and communicate with the original developer and say, hey, can you please add your new project into the main solution that everybody's using, right? And which is fine, but this should not be a problem, right? We should not get into this situation at all. And the fact is that you should realize that solutions are not really required for .NET development or ASP.NET Core development. You don't need to use solutions, and you don't need to get into this mess to start with, right? And also, if you step back, the only reason why this developer, let's say me, wanted to have my own solution is because it just takes too much time to open this. It takes too much time to build the whole thing, right? It just takes too much time to do everything here in Visual Studio by having more and more projects. So how can we go and get out of this situation, out of this problem altogether? So let me just close this. Now let's go into Visual Studio Code. And for this, let me just go up one directory. And now I'm going to just say code dot. And here we have our code base now in Visual Studio Code, right? And you can see that we have all of our code available here, right? Including our two solutions on the left side here. And so we are going to say, not now, we are not going to be using that feature of Visual Studio Code right now. And so the thing is that what I want you to realize is that to start with, I mean, we just opened this code base here without using the solution, right? So the solution was not required at all for this. And in fact, what we're going to do is just get rid of both the ordering service and the eShop on container solutions. Those are going away, right? Because they are not needed at all. And so now you're going to wonder, well, if they're not needed, how are you going to build this entire thing? Because we don't want to be building one by one each of our projects, right? So that makes sense. So one thing that I want to show you is one nice tool or SDK framework, I guess, which is called the build traversal. And this is a very nice, tooling or I guess NuGet package that you can use to actually build the entire code base without the use of a solution. So let me actually show you this page over here. So this is the page for the EMS build SDKs. You can see the actual location over there, right here. This is where you're going to be able to find it. And so as you see here, you're going to get all the details about this, but what this allows you to do is to define a simple proj file that is going to have this kind of glob pattern that instructs the compiler into how to build every single project that is in your code base, right? So with this, you will not need to stand up solutions or have different solutions to build the code base. Every single project that is in there will be able to be built by this. And how do we use this? So what you want to do is first, let's go back to Visual Studio Code. And so what I'm going to do is just define a brand new file over here that I'm going to call build.proc. And you can call this any way you want, but it should have the .proc extension for a good convention. And now what I'm going to do is just copy this little example over here. I'm going to copy that. Okay, I'm going to paste that here. Okay. And then one thing that this is missing is actually the version of the build traversal that you want to use, because you have to specify the version. So if you just go back here, and we are going to just copy the name of this, I'm going to go into another tab. I'm going to go into nuget.org. And here I'm just going to look for Microsoft Build Traversal. And this is going to show me the latest version. Latest version is 3.2.0. So I'm just going to copy that. And back here, I'm going to say Microsoft Build Traversal /3.2.0. Okay, so that's the latest version at the time that I'm recording this. And so what this, as you can see, what this pattern is saying, go ahead and create kind of a tree map of project references that includes every single project that ends in proc, which is really all of our projects, right? Let's say, for instance, services, ordering API, like that. And so you're going to see that this ends in csproc. You can see that right here, csproc. So everything that ends in proc should be included here under the src directory, right? And so I'll save this. And really that's pretty much it. With this in place, you are able to build the entire code base. So if I just open my terminal now, Ctrl J, and I try to do a .NET build, even without having any solution in place, I'll go ahead and do that. And now .NET, the .NET build tool is able to find every single project in my code base without the need of a solution. So to start with, there is no need for developers to start adding their own solutions. And even if they did so, every other developer or even the CI system is able to go ahead and build the entire code base just by the fact that of having this block file over here. So there is no more a chance of missing one project or another project in the solution, because the solution is not needed at all to start with. And so with this, I hope you get the idea that solutions are not needed, and especially when you're into Visual Studio Code, which is really folder based, right? You can do everything you want in the folder, and this simple, very simple 6 lines file is going to be able to take care of making sure that you always have the ability to build everything in the code base all the time without any problems. The last reason why I prefer Visual Studio Code over Visual Studio is because I believe it makes you a better .NET developer, and that's because Visual Studio Code allows you to get a much better understanding of how the .NET CLI works, and that will prove to be super useful moving on. And so to show that, what we're going to do here is just to create a brand new project both in Visual Studio Code, and just compare a little bit the experience and see how far things are going to take us with each of these editors. So on the left side, I have Visual Studio. On the right side, I have Visual Studio Code. What I'm going to do is just go ahead and say File, New, Project. And what we're going to be creating here is a very simple web application. So it's going to be an ASP.NET Core web app, the one that I have right here. So I'm going to say Next. I'm going to pick the right directory for this, which is going to be under the projects, and select that. The name of our project is going to be hello.net.web, and then the solution is going to be named hello.net.vs. Okay, so I'm going to say Next, and for this we're going to be using .NET 7 actually, so .NET 7, and the rest of the stuff we're going to leave it as is. I'm going to say just create. All right, so our project has been created. Okay, I'm going to close this start screen over there. And so, like I said, this is a very simple web application. And of course, the typical flow here would be just to verify that the thing is working properly, right? So as a .NET developer starting with Visual Studio, what you want to do here is just hit F5, right? So I'm going to do right now, you'll just hit F5. Okay, so that's going to build the project, as you can see there in the output. And that's going to start a debugging session. And is also going to spin up a browser, which is going to show me a super simple UI here for my web application. So this is going to be, I think, a Razor Pages application. So nothing super fancy, right? And so, yeah, so you got our application created and up and running in just a few seconds, right? So that's fine. Now let's compare this with the experience of Visual Studio Code. How would you do the same thing in Visual Studio Code? So here I have Visual Studio Code on my right side. Over here, and of course in Visual Studio Code there's not such a thing as a file new project, right? Because Visual Studio Code is designed for any kind of different coding environments. So in this case, what we're going to do is first create a directory, which is going to be named hello.net.vscode. That's going to be the folder where we're going to create things. So now we are there. Let me just open up Visual Studio Code in that location, and that I can do by doing a file open folder. So I'm going to go into that location over here. So the projects, hello.net.vscode, select folder. Okay, I'll say yes here. And this opens up the Visual Studio Code UI in the context of that directory. Now I'm going to open up my terminal over here. And I'll maximize this for a moment so that we can see better. And so in the case of Visual Studio Code, what you have to do here to create a brand new project is to actually use what we know as the .NET command line interface, or .NET CLI. And that is available for you as soon as you installed the .NET SDK. So if you just type here .NET, you're going to get a little bit of information of what you can do with the .NET command line tool. You can also do .NET-info. That's going to give you a little bit of information about the version that you have installed of .NET, which in my case is version 7.0.101. All right. Now, the thing is, when you want to create a brand new project, what you can do here is first get kind of a list of all the project types that you're able to install. So you can do .NET new list. And this is going to give you a list of all the different projects that you are able to create with your .NET SDK. Now, in our case, what we're interested in right now is really this one over here, Infinite Core Web App. Okay, this is a Razor Pages app. So that's the one that we want to create. And so to do that, what we're going to do is just something as simple as, let me click this, .NET new web app. And then the name is going to be hello.net.web. That's going to be our web app. And I'll just hit enter. And so that's going to go ahead and scaffold or generate all the files required for my project. And as you can see on the left side, that has already been created right there. And if I go ahead and click, let's say I click on program.cs, and I'm going to close this terminal right there. What you're going to see is that the OmniSharp server just kicked off. You can see that over here. OmniSharp just kicked off, and this is the server that enables all of the nice Visual Studio, nice C# IntelliSense in here. And if I click just on this in this dialog, that's going to spin up the .vscode folder that brings in test.json, launch.json, which are required for you to be able to build and run and debug your projects, C# projects in Visual Studio Code. But really, this is already ready to go, just like in Visual Studio. And again, I can just go ahead and hit F5. This is going to go ahead and build the project, and then it's going to start the project right away. Okay, so it's starting. And then once again, I have my my page up and running right here. Now, if I just close this, now notice, and let me minimize this, notice that this is if I wanted to do kind of a debugging session, but I can always just stick to the terminal over here. And while being here, what I can do is just say .NET run. And that's going to have, of course, I have to change tiers. Let me switch to hello.net.web, and then I'll do .NET run. And that's going to go ahead and start my application, right? So there's not really a need for F5. This is a running session without debugging. So I could just copy this URL over here, open my browser over there, and here we are, right? So the project has, the page has loaded just fine. Now let's close this. And let's stop that. Now, as you can see, you can do the same thing both in Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code, right? But what I want to highlight here is that there are going to be situations where you don't have either of these IDEs available, either Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code. If for any reason in your machine, things are just not set up properly, right? Because, for instance, because Visual Studio is having some problems loading, right? It's just crashing for any reason, which happens from time to time. Or if you don't have permissions in the machine to install these GUIs, or if your machine doesn't have enough RAM, for instance, to load Visual Studio because it consumes so much RAM, or you don't have enough space, or for any reason you are not able to access any of these IDEs, what do you do, right? So in that case, let me just close both of them, okay? And now you're left with your, let's say, just your terminal, right? So as a good .NET developer, you should be able to still get things done without having to need an entire IDE or even a code editor to do your job, right? So for instance, let's say that in this case, we got a requirement and we have to make a very simple and small change into the index page of that application that we just created, right? But now but like I said, we don't have any IDE available right now. We don't have even a code editor. What are we going to do? Well, since we know Visual Studio Code, and because we use Visual Studio Code, we are exposed to the .NET CLI right away, because that's what we use it to create a project, and that's what we use it also to run the project. We know that we can do these things without an actual IDE or code editor. So for instance, let me go into hello.net.vscode, okay? As you remember, this is where we have our code base, and I'll actually go into hello.net.web. This is where we have our files, right? And so if you wanted to make a change, I mean, to start with, let's confirm that we can actually run the application. And as you can see, I am outside of Visual Studio Code or Visual Studio, and I can still do .NET Run, right? I can do .NET Run, and my application is up and running. If I just copy this, I'm going to copy that URL, open my browser over here, hit enter. Here is my application, right? So I don't need an IDE to run my .NET application. And what I'm actually going to do is just keep this page open on the right side over there, and I bring my terminal to the left side. Okay, so I'll do Control C, And then I'll do dir again. And so the requirement is that we want to change and just do a small change to this text here. We want it to say something different. And so what we're going to do is just make that change. So what I'll do is go into the pages directory. Okay, so what we have here, we have all these files, and I know that my HTML file is going to be, so Notepad, this is going to be in index.cshtml. So that's the file that has my HTML code. It's right here, right? So this is the one that has the welcome message on the right side. Okay, so if I want to make a change, all I have to do, and just by using Notepad, is to just make the change here. So I'm going to just say, welcome to this site. Okay, that's all I'm going to do. So I'm going to hit save. Okay, and now what I can do is just restart my application. And for that, what I'm going to do is actually just go into another terminal, just to keep things simple. I'm going to copy the location. I'm going to go into that location. And I'm going to say .NET run. Okay, .NET run. Okay, application restarts. If I refresh this now, you can see that the title has changed, right? Welcome to this site. Now, the cool thing with .NET, and as you learn about the .NET CLI, is that you can even improve even further this developer flow. So for instance, instead of doing .NET run all the time, what you can do is do .NET watch, right? So .NET watch right there is going to be watching for any changes that we make into our code base, right? And you can see the site is up and running there. And now if what I'm going to do is, let me actually make this a bit smaller, and let's bring my Notepad over there. Let's see if we can accommodate it in the right place. Perhaps there. Okay, yeah, also like that. I'm going to say .NET rocks. Okay, that's going to be my text, and I'm going to save this. So file, save. Notice that the .NET CLI notices the change, and yeah, I mean, it just changed it right away, right? So I am able to have a simple but still nice flow here, where I can make changes to my application without ever needing an IDE or a code editor. Now, of course, this functionality of hot reload is also available in Visual Studio. Definitely it is, but I didn't need to install tons and tons of gigabytes of tooling in my box, or use tons and tons of memory or space, right, to be able to get to this experience here. Right, and this not just works for HTML files, right? This is a very simple HTML, but what if I have to change something like it's a C# based file? So let me actually go back to my first PowerShell. Let me now open. So I'll do Notepad. It's going to be index.html.cs. Okay, so this is my code file, right? This represents the C# code behind that page. So I'm going to put that over here, so we can see. And what I'm going to do is just something very, very simple. In the onGet method here, which is the one that's invoked when the page is about to be rendered on the server side, we're going to just say, we're going to be using this logger, which is the one that you can use to log information to either to your console or to any of the sources I have been configured for logging. I'm going to say logger.log information, and I'm just going to say, hello there, right? That's all it's going to do. Okay, just hello there. So now I'm going to go ahead and also just save here. Okay, and then back here, as you can see, it was actually super fast, but the file changed. Notice that the file changed over here. Hot reload detected the change, and the change is right there. And if I start refreshing this page, you're going to see that hello there starts popping up on the left side. Right? So hot reload even worked for the C# code, not just HTML code. And again, I am able to do all this stuff because I know how to use the .NET CLI, and that's because I got used to it because I had to do Visual Studio Code and not just Visual Studio, where everything is kind of hidden from me in terms of this additional tooling that I can use to manage this. Now, I can do even more things with this, right? So for instance, if I wanted to, I could go back here and I could create even more types of projects. Like for instance, if I just go back here, if I need to create some tests for my application, I could just do .NET new xunit, and then we're going to name this project hello.net.web.tests. Hit enter, This is going to include my XUnit unit tests, and of which I'm not going to actually write a test right now, but there's one built into that code generated code. So I'm going to go into hello.net.web.tests, and if you wanted to just run my tests without having to have any code editor or any IDE, I can just say .NET test, and that's going to go ahead and run any test that have been defined in that project. There's just one simple test in there. We're going to take a look in a moment. But as you can see, it was able to run my tests without ever needing to, again, go back to an entire IDE. Now, if we go back into Visual Studio Code, so I'm going to do code here, and perhaps I'm actually just going to back here and just stop this for a moment. And then back to this one, I'm going to do code dot, go back to Visual Studio Code, and you're going to be able to see that now we have these two projects, right? So there's one for my web application and one for my test, and that test that we just saw is just doing nothing right now, but I just wanted to prove the point that we can create that test from the command line. Now, knowing the CLI is not important just for your local development, in this case where you don't have an IDE. It's also interesting for the cases where you want to move beyond just a local box and you want to do things like, for instance, establishing a CI/CD process or even just a CI process for your application, so that anytime you're checking your changes to your source control, let's say GitHub, the CI process verifies that code compiles and that tests are running and that everything is going just fine. So what would we have to do to enable that? First thing we're going to do is to actually create a build.proc file like the one that we created in the other demo, so that we are able to build the entire thing in one shot. Right, and to do that, what I'm going to do is to go back into my file explorer here, and I'm going to go, remember we did this in the eShop on containers demo, so we have builder.proc over there, so I'm just going to copy that guy. So I'll copy this, I'll go into projects and into hello.net vscode, and I'm going to paste that over here. There you go, builder.proc is right here. Now we don't have an src directory in this case, so I'm going to just simplify this by removing that. Okay, so now we have our build.proc. We don't need a solution for any of this. And so now if I open my terminal and I just say .NET build without having any solution, this is going to be able to build both of the projects that are available in my code base just by doing that, right? And even more, I can also do .NET test, and that's going to run any tests available in the projects that are included in my code base, right? So yeah, this, of course, expected it passed. Now, now that we have this, what we want to do is just push this into a source control location so that we can see how to enable a CI/CD process. So to do that, what I did already is I prepared already a GitHub repository that I called hello.net.vscode. What we're going to do is just check in this code over there. So to do that, we're just going to follow these instructions here. So first thing we're going to do is just git init. Okay, here in the terminal. Git init, so this initializes the code base for what we're going to, for being able to commit and push it, right? And so, but the only thing is that we may have more files about to check in here than the ones that we want to check in. So for instance, everything that's inside the OBJ directory, right, these guys here, that should not be checked in because those are temporal files that are only required in your box as you're building things, right? So this bin directory or this OBJ directory, and same for the other project, are not going to be needed. So how can we just exclude that from a Git? As you know, you may know that's where you want to use a git ignore file. And it turns to be that you can also use the .NET CLI to create one of those. So let me collapse this a little bit. And so notice that if you do .NET new list, there's one option here, going up, there's one option to create a git ignore file. So scrolling up here, that option is available right here, .NET git ignore file. So really all I have to do at this point is just say, I'll clean this, .NET new git ignore, and that by itself is going to create this brand new file over here, that git ignore file, that is already able to exclude many of the very common things that you want to include as a .NET developer in an application, right? And notice now that my bin and OBJ directories over here are no longer included in the files that are going to be checked in. They are grayed out. That means that they're not going to be included. So, and the files are much less now. So now I feel much more confident about this. So what I'm going to do is just include some comment here. This is going to be my first commit. I'll do commit here. I'll say yes. All right. I'll close all my files and I'll open my terminal and then back into GitHub over here. We'll not have a README for now, and then I'll rename my branch into a main branch. Why not? That's fine. So my branch is now main. And then next thing, I'm going to connect my local box with the remote by using this line here. Okay. So now my remote is that location on GitHub. And so anything I push is going to go by default into that location. And then lastly, I can go ahead and do my push. So just copy this last line over here, over there. All right. So now the code is in GitHub, and then we can confirm that by going back over here. Let me show you that over there. If I just refresh this, my code is now on GitHub. Everything is there. It's just 1 minute ago. All right. But the cool thing is that now that I have this here, I can very easily establish a CI/CD process with GitHub Actions. So if we go into the Actions tab over here, what we can do is to select between these templates for whatever makes most sense for what we want to do. In this case, what really makes most sense is this one here in continuous integration, the .NET one over here. I'll click on Configure. And this is going to prepare us or generate kind of a .NET.yaml file that has the initial content here. And I won't go into much details about what's going on here, but what you want to know is that what this means is that anytime that a change is checked in or merged into the main branch in this code base, and that's what this guy says here, the following set of steps are going to be taken directly in the GitHub side, right? And so we have a build job over here that's going to be running in an Ubuntu machine. And then it has a bunch of steps. First step is to go ahead and check out the code. Next step is to set up .NET into the machine to make sure that we have the .NET SDK available over there. In our case, since we did a .NET 7 application, what we want to do is to do .NET version 7.0x. But then comes the interesting part. We have these 3 steps here that rely on the .NET CLI. So if I was a Visual Studio developer, I may not even be aware of the fact that there is a .NET CLI. So I would be a little bit lost here. I don't know what to do. But since I am a Visual Studio Code developer, I do know about the .NET CLI, and I am at least a little bit exposed to it, right? So this doesn't really surprise me. So what this is telling is that we're going to have a step for restoring all the dependencies, doing dependencies of our project. Then we have another step to doing the actual build process. And the last step is going to run all of the tests that we have available. And so the way that our code base is structured, this should just work just fine. And because we have the build.proc file, right? So everything should work at the root. So we will be able to restore and then build with -- no restore means since we already did the restore, let's not do the restore again, right? We can just go ahead and build. And when we're done with that, we can go ahead and do the .NET test that we just did in my box, right? And there's no need to build it. And we want to do normal verbosity. So this should just work as it is, and I am happy with this because I am familiar with the .NET CLI. And so now we have this, what we can do is just click on Start Commit, and then I'll accept the defaults over there, and then I'll say Commit New File. All right, and so the YAML has been created. Now, what you're going to notice is that if we go into Actions, there's a brand new action kicking off right here. So create.net, because I just committed some changes in there. There's a new file in there, it notices that, and it kicks off this process, which right now I just have one job over here, which is the build job. That is already running, and that is following one by one all of the steps that we defined in that YAML file. So right now you can see it is restoring the dependencies, right, via the build.proc file. Then it will go ahead and build the project to make sure that everything compiles, we're not breaking the build, and finally it's going to go ahead and run all the tests. As you can see, it runs and it completed. So this was a full success. And if you go back to Visual Studio Code and you do git pull, you're going to see on the left side that our brand new vscode, that github.net YAML file is available over here also, because we checked in the UI of GitHub, it was checked into the code base, and now it's available over here. Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's what I wanted to show you. And because we were able to do this process with a lot of confidence because of the fact that we are exposed to the .NET CLI, right? So as a Visual Studio Code developer, you are exposed to that, and that gives you a lot of more opportunities to unblock yourself in things that are fairly trivial, really, but when you are more of a Visual Studio developer, you're more constrained into doing the magic of Visual Studio, but never really learning a little bit more deep into what you can do with the .NET tooling. I hope that helps clarify my reasoning behind always using VS Code in all my .NET tutorials. Have you experienced similar issues as me? Please let me know in the comments. I would love to know your experiences with VS Code and Visual Studio. Also, check out my site for additional resources designed for .NET developers ready to take the next steps in their careers. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you are the first to know whenever I publish new videos. See you next time!